This case study describes lessons learned during the response to the Great Springfield Tornado in Massachusetts. It is presented by Robert Hassett, the Director of the Office of Emergency Preparedness in Springfield.
Before we get going, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Springfield. It's been around for about 375 years. We have a current population of about 153,000 with a population density of about 5,000 people per square mile according to the 2010 census. We're located right on the Connecticut River, which is the source of really a lot of our benefits and a lot of our problems. And currently we have a government consisting of what's called strong mayor. That's important to us because just a few years ago we were run by a control board from the state of Massachusetts. And now we have a new mayor and a new city council, and we're on a strong financial footing. Springfield's experienced a lot of disasters in the past, mostly weather-related. We had the large flood in 1936. We had the hurricane in 1938. Hurricanes again in 1955 with Hurricanes Diane and Carol, and several large fires and one very large chemical incident, a chlorine fire, in 1987. So now the tornado has had a significant impact on us, and combined with that, this has been a very rough year because we had two large blizzards early in 2011. We had the tornado on June 1st. That was followed by a large storm right after that, about 2 weeks after the tornado. And since then, we've had a hurricane and an early fall snowstorm, which impacted just about the entire region, not just the city of Springfield. Just a little bit about my office, the Office of Emergency Preparedness. The office originated during World War I as the Office of Civil Defense. Then in 1991, it was changed to the Office of Emergency Preparedness. We have two full-time folks, myself and an emergency planner, and then we have 4 volunteer radio telephone operators and 1 on-call deputy who's the safety officer for the city, and during times of emergency he comes on as our deputy of operations. We have a full-time emergency operations center which was built in 2001, and in 2005 our department was transferred to the Springfield Fire Department by the control board because they said we were just 2 people is too small to be in a department by ourselves. On June 1st, we were impacted by not 1 tornado, but about 3 tornadoes. The tornado started in Westfield in the Munger Hill area, moved into West Springfield, then into Springfield, Wilbraham, Munson, Brimfield, and then on to Worcester County. Again, I said we had multiple tornadoes. One was perhaps the biggest, and that was the one that caused the most damage, but we did see the other 2 go right over the top of Springfield. So that was pretty significant and also at the same time pretty scary. The tornado that impacted Springfield was an EF3, Enhanced FUJITA Scale 3, which gives us a speed between 136 and 165 miles an hour. The one that went through Springfield was averaged at about 160 miles an hour. Again, we were looking at 3 tornadoes with a speed, the one that really impacted us was about 160 miles per hour. It hit Springfield about 4:30 in the afternoon. We actually were able to watch it come across from Westfield and West Springfield on television and also just by looking out the window. So it fortunately did give us enough time to get everybody sheltered, at least those people that were paying attention. We had a lot of people on the highway that just kind of didn't even stop and accidentally were missed by the tornado just by sheer luck. The supercell developed over western Massachusetts, and it actually traveled 39 miles from Westfield to Charlton and had an average width of about half a mile. So at first everybody thought tornadoes were a rare event, but in fact about 2 weeks before the June 1st I was briefing the Springfield City Council and let them know what were the natural and technological disasters that could impact the city. And one of the things I mentioned that there was a risk of tornadoes in that we have a small tornado alley going from the Windsor Locks area of Connecticut all the way up through the Springfield area and into Worcester. And actually, there were quite a few chuckles on the part of the city council. Unfortunately, 2 weeks later, we actually had one of those tornadoes. Massachusetts averages about 1.1 EF2 through 5 tornadoes per year. When you look at it statistically, that's 1.1 per 10,000 square miles per year, which is the same as happens in Connecticut and, surprisingly, Missouri and Texas. The largest tornado that we know of is the 1953 EF4 tornado, otherwise known as the Worcester tornado, which killed 97 people. The Springfield tornado, which was killed 4 people, 2 people in Westfield, 1 in Munson, and 1 other person. And then the 1995 EF4 Great Barrington tornado, which killed 3 persons. So when I looked at it statistically, I found that there were in fact 50 tornadoes within 25 miles of Springfield since 1950. So it's not such a strange occurrence. So let's look at the experience of what happened in Springfield and how Springfield managed the tornado incident. The tornado crossed over at the railroad bridge, crossed over the Connecticut River, and then, strangely enough, moved south on the Connecticut River and then right into Springfield's Riverfront Park. It moved through Court Square, then onto Main and Howard Streets, up Central Street, Orange Street, and through the Island Pond Road area. In this part, in the part we just mentioned, it was affecting mostly multifamily residential areas and the business area. After it moved into the Island Pond Road, it was mostly impacting single-family structures. Then it moved into East Forest Park, South Branch Parkway, onto Tinkham Road, and then into the town of Wilbraham. The tornado impacted 8 out of Springfield's 17 neighborhoods. An average going through Springfield was about a quarter-mile long and traveled a path of 6.2 miles. Just looking at some of the destruction, when we're looking at public buildings, it damaged Brookings Elementary School, Mary Dryden School, the Howard Street School, the Old First Church where George Washington actually spoke, Camp Wilder, which is a summer camp for children owned by the city, and the South End Community Center. It impacted 3 major private schools. One was Springfield College. It hit the Springfield College campus. It absolutely destroyed Cathedral High School, which belongs to the Diocese of Springfield, and also the McDuffie School, which is up on Maple Street. It also impacted and did a lot of damage to 10 public parks. So just take a look at these slides. What you're looking at, the photo on the top, is the South End Community Center. That was formerly a Massachusetts Army National Guard armory. The building was incredibly sturdily built. And if you're looking at those shingles, those are slate shingles, and we found those for miles and miles beyond Springfield. The picture on the bottom is a small pond in a residential neighborhood in East Forest Park, and it just looks like a war zone went through there. Most of those houses were either had significant damage. Some were even lifted right off their foundation, so the people taking refuge in their basement, when the house came off the foundation and flew God knows where, they were looking up at blue sky after it happened. We lost about 220 buildings in the housing area, containing about 514 units that were condemned. We lost 179 single-family homes, about 350 rental units, and about 347 people had to be sheltered after the event was over. 74 small businesses were destroyed, and very shortly, maybe a week or 2 later, 47 businesses opened. We also had significant damage to 13 churches. Some of the other impacts, we had 8 historic sites condemned, and 2 actually had to be demolished because they were just so dangerous we couldn't leave them up. Springfield was known as a city of trees, and we lost over 3,000 street trees. Those are trees that were within 14 feet of the street and belonged to the city. And we also lost about 7,500 other trees that were in parks or yards. Now, you say, okay, so what, a tree falls over. But if you look at the picture on the lower right-hand side, when those trees come up and are blown over, we found out that those trees are attached to gas lines and water lines, which were a significant impact in the utilities, also causing some very dangerous situations with gas leaks and flooding combined with the power lines that were down and sparking. The city's response was pretty quick. We were able to see the tornado coming. We had 15 minutes of advance warning, and so we actually saw it cross into the city of Springfield. We immediately deployed a task force using incident command down to Maple Street, where we thought initially that's where most of the destruction were. It turns out that that's just where the tornado started to cause most of its destruction. We brought in the regional fire task force, the local EMS task force. All 3 regional medical centers were activated and fired up their emergency operations center. We had the Department of Fire Services EMS task force come in. We had the Urban Search and Rescue task force come in from the eastern part of the state. The Massachusetts State Police got there very quickly. Within a few hours, we had over 1,000 Army National Guard forces in here, and also the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. Where do you begin? Well, obviously you begin with the priorities: life safety, stabilization of the incident, and protection of property and the environment. So life safety was our first priority. So we were searching for people, we were triaging and treating the injured, we were clearing emergency routes of debris and down lines so emergency vehicles could get through to help people. We started evacuating people that were impacted in the area or out of buildings that were too dangerous to occupy. We set up 2 shelters in the city, and we had to protect those people that were just outside because more storms were coming through. We had to stabilize the incident because we needed to get out and inspect those structures that were so dangerous. We had to render utilities safe, and that means turning off power, water, and gasoline. We had to prevent unauthorized entry of buildings. People want to go back and get their stuff, and the building was just too dangerous, and we couldn't let them back in. Even though we knew and understood their life was in those buildings, we couldn't allow them to go back in because it was just too dangerous, and we wanted to prevent injuries there. Next, we had to manage all this debris very quickly. Some buildings actually had to be demolished overnight, including a large daycare center and an architectural firm that just had to be ripped down. Couldn't go back in there at all. And then we had to provide for security, and that's where the National Guard, the state police, and the local police forces came to bear. So what looked like for the initial impact, we had 34 patients transported to local hospitals. 43 were actually hospitalized, with lots and lots more having minor injuries. And luckily, only one of those patients stayed more than 10 days. So we were very, very lucky, as opposed to other communities that had fatalities. But I think it was the fact that we had a little bit more warning time than they did. We saw over 1,000 structures damaged or destroyed. We had 13,000 customers without power. On top of that, we had numerous gas leaks, water leaks, and again, hundreds of people were initially displaced. As the response matured, our command center moved from the 50 Maple Street location in a commercial building to the Basketball Hall of Fame, which is seen pictured here. From there, we were able to request additional resources. We declared an emergency for the city within the hour, and the mayor was able to sign that and get that to Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. We started risk communication to let people know what activities were going on, and we again continued the life safety activities of clearing streets so emergency vehicles could get through and people at risk could get out. We did the search and rescue, and that was amazing. With the help of the fire department task forces and the urban search and rescue teams, they were able to inspect and look into every house, every basement, every closet, every shed, every garage, all 3 times within 72 hours. So we were very, very sure that there was no one left behind or no one not found. We continued with the evacuation and also with mass care and taking care of people. let's look a little bit at the incident command infrastructure. We were operating under a unified command with state agencies as well as the services in Springfield. We appointed a safety officer. We had a very large operations section, a planning section to keep track of everything, and a logistics branch to support it. When we look at the operations section, we see that we had a fire rescue branch, a security branch to maintain order, a mass care branch to take care of people, an EMS branch to take care of not only the victims, but also help keep things organized, because one of the things we found is that just because we have some neighborhoods of the city affected, it doesn't mean people in other neighborhoods are going to stop having heart attacks or car accidents. So we had to continue with that. We had a transport group to move everybody around, and we had a public works branch to help clean up the debris and manage all the debris that was still on the ground. We had a planning group that was tracking everything, a documentation unit, because we know that if it isn't written down, in the long run, it didn't happen. So we wanted to make sure we recorded everything. We had a resource unit to track all the resources that were in the area, and a situation unit to track what was going on a near real-time basis. Our logistics unit provided communications, medical services for responders, feeding operations provided by the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. We had a facilities unit because we were operating right near the Basketball Hall of Fame, and again a ground support unit to make sure everybody had fuel to operate. We wanted to make sure everybody could be transported around, and we also had to provide for maintenance for all the pieces of equipment that were there. In addition to the incident command post that we had at the Basketball Hall of Fame, we also had an emergency operations center at the Raymond Sullivan Public Safety Complex. So different than the incident command post, the Emergency Operations Center is responsible for the strategic overview. So we don't control the assets in the field, but it's where all the decision makers are to make strategic decisions, leaving all the tactical decisions to the lower commands in the incident command post. It's there that all the emergency support functions were located, and essentially everything came under my purview as the emergency manager for the city to keep all that kind of coordinated. We also held all our press conferences there to keep the public informed and the media informed as to what was going on. Just a quick look at the Emergency Operations Center. We had desks for mass care, for utilities, for medical, for public works, transportation, security, and search and rescue. As we moved into day 2, we started to transition from into the emergency stabilization phase. So what we were doing was we were rendering utilities safe. We were assessing buildings to see how safe they were. We were doing a lot of debris removal from the streets to try to get things back to normal as quickly as possible, although that wouldn't happen for about 2 weeks. We were sheltering about 347 people. We were also sheltering animals. We had 2 animal shelters open, one at the Dakin Center and run by the Humane Society, and one at the public animal shelter at the O'Connor Center. We had 2 DART teams in from Massachusetts, and we also had the Massachusetts SMART team in to take care of animals that were either displaced by the storm or, since the shelters don't allow anything but service animals in the shelters, taking care of people's animals who were in the shelter. We also did some mental health and risk communication, which was huge because people needed to know what was going on. They needed to know where to go. They needed to know what to do. So we were able to provide that for them. On June 3rd, we actually started to transition into the restoration and recovery phase. And what you're looking at here is one of the buildings that was just demolished overnight. It was just too unstable to stand, and we were not allowed to let anybody go back in there for personal possessions, for corporate possessions. It was just too dangerous, and so we ended up having to take it down right away. One of the things we focused on was utilities restoration, and it was amazing. Western Massachusetts Electric actually set 180 poles in 72 hours, getting all 13,000 customers back in service within that 72 hours, except for a few people whose houses were just so badly damaged they couldn't have utilities restored to them. We had set up some debris removal staging areas. Where do you put all this stuff? How do you handle it? It's not only just trees, it's contaminated materials with asbestos and lead and all kinds of other things. So you have to have safe places to put that there. We consolidated from 2 shelters down to 1 shelter at the Mass Mutual Center. We started looking for housing, permanent housing for displaced people. Schools were still in session for another week, so we actually had no school on Thursday and Friday, but we were able to open schools and even bring the children whose schools were destroyed to other schools, and also pick up all the children and establish bus routes through all this debris for everybody. So everybody got to go to school for 1 more week. Didn't make a lot of kids happy, but it made a lot of parents happy, and it made the school department happy. We were actually participating in getting ready for the federal disaster declaration process, and I think we did pretty well there. And so we're moving on to the recovery phase. Let's look at some of the elements that made the recovery and moving through the incident successful for the city of Springfield. Number 1 was an element of caring, right down from the mayor's office through department heads to the people that were actually working on the street. People really showed a deep sense of caring. These are our neighbors, our families, our friends. It was us and our community that was affected. So you saw this deep sense of caring, and people picked up on that it was genuine. Our leadership was excellent. The mayor, told people, yes, this is bad, but we're going to get through it together. We need to stick together, and we're going to pull through this. Luckily, the talent part was put together, years before, when the mayor put together his cabinet. And so we were very fortunate that the mayor and his staff brought together a lot of competent people. People showed a high level of competency, relationships that have been developed through exercises, through operations, through previous disasters. All that came back to us and was very fundamental in having a success. And the last one was communications. Not only communications in the traditional ways, because the traditional ways got knocked out. We didn't have cable television. We didn't have telephone. So we had to get back to more basic methods. So that involved sending people out and going street by street, house by house, having lots of small community meetings in churches and schools that were still open and safe, and just meeting with people, not only once a week, but multiple times during the week, putting flyers and information notices on the Salvation Army vans, on the Red Cross vans. We sent fire trucks and police cars constantly patrolling the area, handing out flyers and giving people information. So our traditional methods of communication weren't available to us for about 2.5 weeks. And then we had to use alternative methods, and that worked very well for us. Let's look at a few of the things that we think we did well. One was the search and rescue operations. That worked very well for us, and the fact that we found no injuries was awesome. Preparing for FEMA was another thing. We sent our A-team. When FEMA showed up, we had our ducks in a row, and we sent out the A-team with the FEMA representative. So instead of sending the second string or the third string, we actually sent out our director of public works. We sent out the director of parks and facilities. We sent out the chief of staff. We sent out our top-level management with the FEMA folks so they could see exactly what happened. And instead of taking 3 days to prepare our preliminary damage assessment, they showed up at 9 o'clock in the morning. We had most of the stuff completed by late afternoon. So that was a very successful effort for us, and we recommend it to everyone else. Our public outreach, you can see one of the pictures of our public meetings here, and also reaching out on a personal way with the Salvation Army and the fire department. That was excellent for us. We got our schools back in working order. It finished out the school year. Our pet shelters were awesome. And the DART teams from Massachusetts and the Massachusetts SMART team was excellent in helping. And remember, people won't go to shelters if they can't bring their pets. So we had to provide some provision for that. Utility restoration was awesome. We got the city back within 72 hours for gas and electric. Our debris management was just on a huge scale that we had never ever imagined. Little to think that we'd be using that just a few months later for the giant snowstorm we just had. And then our post-incident safety was just something I actually couldn't believe. We put the word out to, be safe. We knew people were using chainsaws for the first time. It was very hot. We actually had, during the recovery period, we actually had a heat wave come through the state, and we had no severe injuries. So we were very, very thankful that we came through this okay as a city. So what are some of the things that we could have done better? First was donations management and volunteer management. We used the state 211 system for that, and also the United Way to manage our donations and volunteers. So it took like a day or so to get that going, but once it got going, it went okay, but we wanted that to be a little bit faster next time. Our shelter management, as long as local resources were managing the shelter, it was okay. But when we had the larger organizations come in, when Red Cross people came from New York and Texas, it became a little awkward, and I think it's because they didn't understand our culture and how we do things. So we're working on that, and we actually had a second shelter experience since then, and we worked only with local resources. And matter of fact, even though we didn't keep people in shelter for 5 weeks, we only kept them in there for about a week. We did a much better job with just local resources. Mental health was really tough because the mental health professionals weren't really prepared for anything this terrible on this scale in this neck of the woods. And so I think that was a big wake-up call for them, and I think they're better prepared to manage that if something like that should happen in the near future. Family preparedness and preparedness for on the commercial side was low. However, since then, since the tornado, we've had a hurricane, and we've had an earthquake and a number of other things. And when we hit the snowstorm in October, the very heavy snowstorm, and we lost power in most places for over a week, people were much better prepared, and businesses were much better prepared than they had been during the tornado. So in a way, the tornado was somewhat of a blessing in that it helped prepare people for future activities. We had to watch the contractors. Some of the people coming from out of state were a little bit on the slimy side and started taking advantage of people. So our law enforcement people had to jump in there. Warehouse management, we went to a warehouse management that mostly dealt with just-in-time supplies for the city. And now we went into hundreds, if not thousands, of items moving through there on a daily basis. So we really had to pick up the pace with that, and we only have one warehouse manager. So he had to get some help. Vendor management was a little tough. We had to watch all the people coming in and out of Springfield. And then rogue agencies were very, very tough. We had one particular state agency that came in and started doing good things for people, but they didn't coordinate it with any of the other state agencies or the Emergency Operations Center. And that caused traffic jams and some near riots because they were handing out free resources. So once we got that fixed, that was okay, but we're going to be watching that in the future. And in fact, we didn't have any problems with that during the snowstorm. Okay, so let's look at some lessons learned that I think may benefit other communities and at least have the benefit of our experience. One is what I call the 95% rule, and that means you can't take your eye off the ball. You have to focus 95% of your effort on 95% of the population. There's 5% out there of things and people that are going to cause distractions for you to take your eye off the ball, and you just can't do it. So don't be detained by the detractors. Keep on target. Politicians are going to show up. Now, that's a two-edged sword. You need them, you want them, but when they show up, everything shuts down. The heliport shuts down, vehicles come to a stop, the Emergency Operations Center staff comes to a stop, the command post comes to a stop. So again, you're going to have them there for a couple hours. They need to see what's going on because they're there because they care and also because they're bringing you stuff that you need. So two-edged sword, just be prepared for it. Keep disasters local. Okay? It's your problem. Other people are going to come in, much larger organizations. They're going to want to take over. It's just the nature of the beast. But keep remembering, it's your problem. When they go away, you're going to be left with the consequences. So remember, it's your responsibility. You make the decisions. You're in charge. If you build it, they will come. So if you tell people you're going to have a resource available before you announce it, it better be there and it better be ready to rock and roll. FEMA doesn't come with money. Matter of fact, they don't come for a long time with money, and when they do, they don't just start handing out money. Everything has to be justified. Everything has to have a reason. We are just getting here in December the money from the tornado for rebuild city infrastructure that we spent last June. So FEMA money doesn't come fast. It does come, but it doesn't come right away. People, and I guess this is partly because of what people see in the media, they think FEMA shows up right away and everything you need is there. That's not true. It's a very measured and deliberate action on FEMA to come in and help. If you ask for help as far as the state goes, as far as volunteer organization goes, it's going to come. The day after the tornado, I had a phone call that said there's 400 windows and 600 doors on their way. So you better have a place to, if you ask for it, you better be prepared to receive it. Okay, and again, be careful what you ask for because it will come. Curiosity seekers are dangerous pests. We had literally thousands and thousands of people from all over the place. We saw license plates from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, everywhere around here where people could drive from, came to see the tornado, and they were nothing but in the way. Power and line crews, debris removal crews, ambulances, National Guard couldn't get through because of all these people jamming our roadways. And even though the state police and the National Guard tried to keep them out and the mayor pleaded with them to stay out, the governor pleaded with them to stay out, they still came and jammed everything up. So we have a plan now to deal with that, but they were very dangerous and really got in the way. Be careful of responder burnout. Everybody wanted to help because, again, it was our community, it was our families, it was our friends, and nobody wanted to leave their post and do everything they could. But at some point, we became ineffective, and so you have to not let everybody come to help at once, and you have to have a measured program for letting responders get some rest. The other thing we found out is the rest of the world is, again, moving on. So people are still having car accidents, people are still having heart attacks, babies are still being born, and you have to be ready to accommodate all that as well as the emergent situation at hand. And the last thing is you have to have a thick skin because you're trying your best to take care of people, but people are going to try to take advantage of you. It's just the nature of people. Okay? All you have to remember is always forgive, never forget. So I'm Bob Hassett. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Springfield. And if you need us, give us a holler. I'll try to help you.